Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Kriti and I'm back with another interview on my channel. Now, do you know the unwritten rules of working in Denmark? If not, then this video is for you. Today I have Kay with me, who is a writer, a podcast host, a keynote speaker, and I am super excited to speak with Kay today about her book, the latest book, the updated edition of How to Work in Denmark with three new chapters. So, Kay, congratulations on the book and welcome to my YouTube channel.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
So, Kay, to begin with, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your journey, and how long you've been living here in Denmark?
Well, I've been in Denmark for 20 years. I came here on vacation and I thought, I like it. This is a place where I could live. Now, that particular day had very good weather. Generally, we do not have very good weather. So I was cheated a little bit on the weather there. But there's many things I like about Denmark. I think it is sophisticated without being too intense. I had been living in Manhattan beforehand. And if you visited New York, it's just constant competition all the time. Everybody wants your job, everybody wants your boyfriend, everyone wants your apartment, everybody wants your seat at the restaurant. You're always fighting. And so Denmark was a lot more calm. And I was at a place in my life where I thought, that's what I want. So I came here for a job with a tech company, actually, and they did the executive move. They brought all my furniture along and they put me up in a hotel until I found an apartment. And I found an apartment and I moved in my furniture. And then the tech company went bankrupt. I was in
Oh,
Denmark. I didn't know anybody and I didn't speak the language. I had all this furniture, so you can't really just get back on the plane when you've got all the furniture. Then I found another job at another tech company. They went bankrupt after 9 months. So kind of the angel of death here. Um, then I was unemployed for a whole year. And because I wasn't a permanent resident, I didn't get any of the social welfare payments. I had to go through all my savings. And I used to go to every museum in Denmark on its free day because I had nothing else to do and I had no money. So I learned a lot about Denmark in that year. And I also learned Danish in that year. And at the end of the year, I got a job at Danske Bank, which is the biggest bank in Denmark.
yeah.
I stayed there for 8 years and I almost made them bankrupt. I got really, really close to make, I just didn't get over the edge, which was so frustrating. And then I worked for Carlsberg Beer and another bank. And for the past 10 years, I've worked for myself.
But Kay, how is it for you to live in Denmark as an American? Do you see the differences? How is it to live here?
Well, I see a lot of parallels in part because a lot of Danes went to the US. When we think of Denmark now as a very prosperous, safe, peaceful country, but about 150 years ago, about the same time as the American Civil War, they had a terrible war against Germany and they lost really badly. There's not enough food to go around. It was economic deprivation. And about 15% of their population left within about 10 years. Huge wave of people leaving Denmark. Many of them came to the US, including to the part of the US where I live or grew up in, which was Wisconsin. So in Wisconsin, you'll still see Danish bakeries all over the place, and they have like Danish restaurants and stuff. And in some places like Iowa and some places in California, they have little fake Danish towns that people have made up and they're kind of touristy. And it's funny because the people who live there live like Danish people in the 1860s, not like Danish people now. So that, for example, I saw that they're wearing like the traditional Danish national costume. Nobody wears that here. I never saw it until I saw someone in the US wearing it, which is funny because the Norwegians wear their national costume all the time and the Swedes do it sometimes. I've never, ever seen a Danish person in their national costume. Greenland has one, not Denmark. So there are some parallels between the two. They have a lot in common. But I think the biggest difference is that the US is by definition a multicultural economy. I mean, we
Yeah.
had indigenous Americans and then people came from Europe. Now people are coming from Asia, Africa, South America. It's a mixed country and it always has been and probably always will be. Whereas Denmark, it's a tribe. It's a monoculture. You're coming to somebody else's monoculture.
Yeah. I want to share with everyone watching the video that few things that really stood out for me, that the book is a very simple read, which makes me want to read more. So you have kept the language very simple yet very informative. The next thing that because we have been always taught, always read a book from start to end, but what I feel with this book is you open any page and there you have it, the information that you're looking for. So this is like a handy book, you keep it with you. Okay, I want to know about something about working in Denmark for a particular topic, and you have your information out here. And the topic that you have covered, like what to do when your Danish boss is angry. I I haven't read this information anywhere else. So thank you so much for this fantastic book. And here is my next question. I really want to know what has inspired you to write this book, How to Work in Denmark, because you also have a book, How to Live in Denmark. So what was the inspiration behind this book?
Well, it's funny because How to Live in Denmark came from the How to Live in Denmark podcast, which was originally only supposed to be a practice thing. When I left my last job in the bank, I wanted to work as a voiceover, like India, the wonderful country, like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do
yeah.
that things. You could probably can't tell because I have a cold and my voice is bad, but I have a nice voice when I don't have a cold. And I still do those things. So if you guys are hearing any e-learning, like turn to page 3, that's correct. I do that.
Yeah,
So I started doing the podcast to practice for my voiceovers. But then I found out that the podcast is really helpful to people because there's so many, as you mentioned, things you just don't know when you get here. So the podcast turned into the book, How to Live in Denmark. I wrote them into transcripts and then fixed them up and turned them into the book. And when I wrote the book, How to Live in Denmark, I found the part people were most interested in was how to work in Denmark. And because I'd worked at Danish companies for a while, I had made some of the mistakes that I saw
yeah.
other people making. So I thought, why does everyone have to make the same mistake? I can write it down and make life a little easier for everyone.
With your experience, even with the book and also working here in Denmark, I really want to know if you can share maybe two pros and cons of working in Denmark.
I think one of the big pros of working in Denmark is the work-life balance. People really do leave the office at 4. Their attitude is, I'm paid for 37 hours a week. I'm going to work 37 hours a week and I'm going to work hard. You know, I used to work on Wall Street and we would work 12, 13-hour days. Did we really work for 12 or 13 hours? Or did we maybe call grandma on her birthday or, oh, there's a shoe sale, let's go check, or have a really long lunch or that sort of thing? We
Yeah,
maybe weren't constantly working. Here, you really are constantly working. You know, don't call grandma at the office. You call her after you get home. And you really focus on, you don't have friends stop by the office or anything like that. During that 37 and a half hours, you're supposed to really, really work. But then at the end, you go home. You know,
mm,
at 4 o'clock, you go home. Oftentimes people with small children, they'll leave at 3:30 or 4 to pick up their child. And this is men as well as women. If your child is ill, it is okay to take a day off work to care for your child. So the idea that the employee's personal time is as important as their work time is very, very big in Denmark. So I think it's good for people who either have families or are starting a family, or people who have hobbies that they
yeah.
really enjoy. I mean, maybe they paint, or maybe they do sports, or have some other thing they really love to do in their free time. Denmark is a great place to do that. You do have that balance. Um, Another thing is, I think, is there's not that constant competition here that you see in countries like the US, the UK, India, China, where everybody's fighting for something. This is a very group-oriented culture. And children are brought up that way from the beginning. Even in school, they do most of their projects as groups, not as individuals. You know, in probably in Indian school, I know in the US school, you always know who the best kid in the class
Yeah.
is. Oh, she got the best score. Oh, he's the smartest guy. They do not do that here. You're not supposed to tell anyone your grades. I mean, obviously, I know one guy's smarter than the other ones, but it's all about the group. And that goes into your working life. So you work together as a group. And if you succeeded as a group. If you fail as a group. You don't say, oh, that was Kay's fault. What an idiot. Yeah, she did it wrong. Or, ooh, Kay's employee of the month. Yay. No, it's about the group. So some people enjoy working like this. Other people, if you are hyper competitive, you're probably not going to be happy in Denmark.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. Like coming from India, as you're mentioning, like we always are talking about who got the best, the employee of the year, or like who got the good marks. We are always comparing that. But here I have felt that it is not like that in Denmark.
No,
No.
no. And I find Americans or Indians who come here, they always want to know, what's the best school for my kids? What's the best school I'm going to live
Yes.
next to or the next
Yes.
school? They don't really do it that way. Now, it is true some schools are better than others,
Mhm.
but it's not like these are the 10 best schools. If you don't go to these 10 schools, you've got no hope.
Yeah.
Uh, there's many good schools, and it particularly depends on the type of child you have. Do you have an extroverted child, an introverted child, a sports type child, a science type child? You think a little bit more about their individual character before you choose a school. And in India, the US, your grades start to matter very early. You know, when you're
Yeah.
10, you're 12, you better be really good or you're going nowhere. In Denmark, I can tell you, and you can get away with doing not very much until you're maybe 16, 17, and still get into the best school at one of the best levels.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But it's also good to know that if you're very competitive, Denmark may not be the country for you because you will not feel that you're achieving something.
That is so true because Danish companies have a very flat hierarchy. They only have 2 or 3 levels of management. So if you're the
Yeah.
sort of person who likes to get promoted every year, that's not going to happen here. You'll get
Yeah.
more and more challenging things to do, and people move horizontally a lot. Like maybe they were in product development and they go to R&D instead, or they're in sales and they go to marketing. But there's only 2 or 3 levels of management. So if you're only going to be happy if you get promoted all the time, you're not going to
Yeah.
be happy here. It's not that type of country.
Okay. Yeah. And Kay, I really want to talk to you about the American dream in a way that so we are three sisters, and my both sisters are in the US, and I'm the one in Denmark. So I'm like rooting for Denmark when I'm back in India. That okay, you should also think about moving to Denmark. But in India, especially, people they want to move to the US, like for studies, for work. So I really want to understand how can I put forward the points which will make Denmark stood out compared to the US.
Mhm. Well, I think they're two very different cultures because Denmark, it's about being in the middle. You know, you can't go too high, but you
Yeah,
can't go too low either. You're not going to end up sleeping on the street, but you're not going to be Elon Musk either. It's not that type of country.
yeah,
Danes don't like elite people. They don't like people who are extremely ambitious. And I know Danish people who are ambitious, they leave. They go to Singapore, they go to San Francisco, they go to London. Ambitious people are pushed down. Even when you look at children's sports here, they call them hygge sports. You don't try all that much. I mean, you try a little bit, but oh, you
yeah,
didn't win, that's okay. So if you are coming from India and you want to be the next head of Microsoft or head of Google, the US is a place for you. If
yeah,
you're coming from India and you want just a nice family life, you know, you've met your partner and you have a couple of kids and you really want to spend time together and enjoy your family life, this is a great place for it. You will have a nicer family life in Denmark. But the government's going to take all your money. So
yeah,
get used to that. You have to be
yeah,
prepared for extremely high taxes. And you're not going to get a fancy title because we don't do fancy titles here. So I frequently say that in Denmark, the thing that is most valuable to Danes is their time. That's why they
mm,
work short hours. They take their 5-week vacations. They spend time with their family and their friends. But don't come here to get rich. You're not going to get rich. And don't come here to be somebody fancy because they really don't do that.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question because you have covered in the book, about the Denmark versus Sweden, Norway, and Germany. And one question on my YouTube channel that I have got recently was this person is asking, he has the option to move to either Denmark or Sweden. And, he's married and he has two daughters. And he's asking, what should I choose, Denmark versus Sweden? So if we keep the working part in mind, what would you suggest?
Well, I think the countries, even though they're right next to each other, they're actually very different. Uh, and the Swedes are often called the stiff older brother. They're called the Germans of Scandinavia. They're seen as kind of humorless, right? And very, very formal. Well, the Danes are called sort of the naughty little brother of Scandinavia, right? They kind of do things their way. And the Swedes are very into process. They do 1 and then 2 and then 3. And the Danes are like, oh yeah, we should get that done, but I don't want to do 2. Let's just do 1 and 3. Okay, let's do it and go.
Yeah,
So they're much more practical. The Swedes make decisions by consensus. So it takes them a long time. There's going to be lots of long meetings, before we decide should the wrapping be red on the product? I think red. Okay, so maybe 10 meetings later, right? And then they're going to stick with red, even if red turns out to be a bad idea, because they have the consensus. We all agreed on it. Whereas the Danes, they'll have some of those long meetings too. So they make all the decisions. We decided on red. Then the next day they find out that green wrapping paper's on sale. Oh, let's just do green. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's much more flexible than Sweden. So it has a little to do with the person's individual character and how they feel comfortable working. Also look into how quickly the spouse will be able to work. The visa regulations in Denmark are bananas, and people are working on them all the time. We have a new government. Hopefully they'll work out. It can be difficult even for a very highly qualified person to get permanent residence in Denmark. There's all sorts of crazy rules. There's crazy rules in Sweden, but they tend to be a little bit more flexible. So I think that this person should look into what the rules will mean for their spouse. Will the spouse be able to work? Will they be able to get permanent residency? Because it's very hard to make the decision to learn the local language if you don't know if you can stay or not. And
Yeah.
I can tell you, if you're going to be in Denmark for more than a couple of years, you really should learn Danish. It should be somebody that's comfortable without a lot of hierarchy and without a lot of very strictly defined job definitions. I think that's a big difference, as I understand working in India versus working in Denmark, is that in India, they'll tell you, you will do this. These are your job roles. Please do that.
Yeah.
Whereas in Denmark, it's much more, this is what we want to achieve. Here's a budget. Here's a timeline. Go. Got any problems? Let me know.
Yeah.
And some people love working that way because they think they love that personal responsibility. They love that independence. They think, wow, I can really use my skill. Other people hate it. This is people from all different parts of the world, not just India, because they're like, my boss gives me no guidance.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. And, I feel like my boss doesn't care at all. It's so chaotic. What do you want? So again, you have to ask yourself, what type of person am I? Do I need structure? Do I need constant guidance and input? Or do I like that independence and freedom?
Yeah. It's about knowing, right? And I think when you're moving to a new country, it's very important to know who you are as a person, because sometimes when you're in your comfort zone, you don't uh, think about that. But when you come out of your comfort zone in a new country, you really need to know, oh, how am I and what is making me happy in the new country.
Yeah, it is so true, because you can't go to another country and change them. You have to
Yeah.
decide, is this the fit for me? Is this where I belong? And I think that's important. Another thing, and this is in the book as well, but Danish bosses give very little positive feedback. They just assume, I hired you, I trust you, you're doing the job. No news is good news. And
Yeah.
so many internationals have told me, my God, I thought I was going to be fired. I thought I was doing a really bad job. And then came my annual review, and they loved me and they gave me a raise. But
Oh
again,
yeah.
at the anti-elite feeling, they don't want to give you too many compliments. They don't want to puff up your head. Even if you're doing a great job, they might not tell you.
Yeah, like also you mentioned that even if your boss is angry, they will not tell that in front of everyone. They
Yeah,
will, he or she will call you in the meeting room and
yeah,
talk one on one.
yeah. And this is true of, I think, both American and Indian culture. We're slightly dramatic people. We're going to say what's on our heart, maybe raise our voices if we feel very passionate. Denmark's not like that. It's a very flat culture. You don't raise your voice, flat
Yeah.
hierarchy, flat culture. So I found that a little hard at the beginning. Sometimes I'd have to take a walk around the block when I got really mad. But you cannot lose your temper here. They don't do that.
Yeah. What about in the future? Do you see that more international would like to come, like in the workplace, like the number has increased or decreased? How many internationals are really interested to move in Denmark?
I think a lot of internationals would enjoy Denmark. And quite frankly, there are not enough Danes that have the technical skills that Denmark needs to move its products ahead. I don't know if that's because people don't study it in school or is not prioritized. But Denmark needs internationals. And it needs them at the top, which is, let's face it, most workers coming from India are IT, medical. These are people at the top of the educational level. We also need an enormous amount of people at the bottom of the income scale, people to pick crops, people to slaughter pigs. It's a huge, huge pork business. Danes don't want to do that. We need people to help with hospitality. We need them at all different levels. So Denmark needs to be able to figure out how to welcome people while maintaining what they love, which is their welfare state.
Yeah.
So in general, people are welcome here with the idea that they will pay taxes and contribute to the welfare state. Unfortunately, Denmark did a terrible job in the 90s and early 2000s, bringing in people and then not putting them in position to contribute to the welfare state. They welcomed a lot of refugees who were often illiterate in their own cultures. And so they were not, they could not work right away. They needed a lot of assistance and that sort of thing. And that has led to some anti-foreigner sentiment.
Yeah.
Which I think is very unfortunate. I'm sure anyone who follows Danish politics knows that there's some very anti-foreigner policies and very anti-foreigner politicians, which I think is too bad. I've often also found that internationals wonder if they're welcome in the Danish workplace. They'll come and they'll be like, hey, I'm the first Indian here. Am I really welcome? In general, your skills are very welcome and you as a person are welcome. But what you may sometimes experience is there's older people who are not accustomed to speaking English all day.
Yeah.
So these people are maybe 50, 60. When they came up, Denmark was all Danish. And here comes a great new talent from the USA, from India, from Italy, wherever. And now they have to speak English.
Mm.
So what you may be thinking of, oh, he doesn't like me because I'm American. He doesn't like me because I'm Indian. Maybe he doesn't like me because now he can't speak Danish anymore.
Yeah. So it's important to understand like what is beneath the reason what is happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It is. But you asked, are internationals welcome? Yeah, Denmark needs them. It really does. It's funny, just in the time that I have been here, it used to be internationals that came here were mostly factory workers,
Yeah.
mostly from Turkey and the Yugoslavia area. When I went to my first Danish class, you always have to repeat lines. And I repeated in Danish, I work in a factory on the outskirts of town. Because most of the people who are learning Danish were people who worked in a factory on the outskirts of town. Clearly, that is not true anymore. Many of the internationals coming are extremely highly skilled.
Yeah, and so Denmark needs people like to work, but Denmark also needs to work on the fact that they need to like find a balance to welcome and have the process of integration, like getting a PR or getting the visa is easier here.
Yeah. And it's foolish that it's so difficult. And it frustrates everybody. It frustrates the business community. It frustrates the internationals. And as I mentioned, you can't make a commitment to Denmark when you don't know if you can stay.
Yeah.
So, and we are competing with many other countries, with Germany, with Sweden, with the US, with Canada for talent. So people are not going to put up with a lot of nonsense. They really aren't.
But what can surprise an expat in a Danish work culture?
I think something that really surprises an expat in the Danish work culture is the way Danes talk to their bosses. In a hierarchical system like India or the US or the UK, you speak to your boss with respect. Here they don't. They will make fun of their boss. They'll be mean to their boss, and they will tell their boss that she is wrong.
Ah.
You have to remember that Danes grew up with a welfare state. So if I lose my job, I still get 2 years of some payments, and I
Hmm.
still have all my healthcare taken care of, and my kids are still going to get to go to school. Danes are not afraid of their boss. What's she going to do to me, right? Matter of fact, I was talking to a foreign boss recently. He told his Danish team, there's going to be some layoffs. And they were like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll finish up my garden in that case. They weren't afraid at all because they have this pillow to land on.
Yeah.
So for that reason, they will disagree with the boss. And Danish bosses expect that. They expect that from you as well because they hired you for your expertise. So your boss is making a decision that might be wrong. I'm going to make the package red. Yeah. And you know perfectly well the competitor has a red package. They expect you to say, we could do that, but what about the competitor? Won't it be confusing? They expect you to disagree with them. And if you
Mm.
don't disagree with them, they assume you agree. They would really hate it if you agreed with them in the meeting room, like, no, yeah, definitely. And then went to the coffee machine. It's like, stupid idea. They expect openness and honesty and transparency. And Danes can do that because they're not afraid of losing their job.
Yeah, this one would be definitely a very shocking thing or the surprising thing for, for people coming from India, because we are like, yes, boss, yes, boss. So to speak your mind in the meeting room is something that would be a good thing for us to learn, actually, I feel.
I think it's probably difficult when you come from a working culture like India to actually not say, yes, boss, yes, boss. Your Danish boss does not want that. Your
Mm,
Danish boss says, look, I paid a lot of money for your expertise. Here's my idea. What do you think?
yeah.
And yes, boss, she can't get anything from that. She wants you to say, well, based on my experience, this is good about that idea, but I think you better consider this. That's what she's paying you for.
Yeah. So, Kay, thank you so much for your time today. It was so lovely to speak with you and cover the topic how to work in Denmark. Everybody watching the video, please, please find your copy. And Kay, tell us, how can people buy the book? Where is it available? Or are you also planning to do a podcast, How to Work in Denmark?
Well, the book is on Amazon, including Amazon India, and you can get the ebook on Apple Books or Google Books, for example. You can listen to the How to Live in Denmark podcast, which will have some episodes on how to work in Denmark as well. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn.
So all the links are in the description. I would definitely suggest you to buy this, because I know a lot of you who are writing to me on Instagram, on YouTube. They want to know how to work in Denmark. So get your copy, and everything is in the description. Do check out and connect with Kay also on LinkedIn. Kay, thank you so much for your time today. It was such a lovely, afternoon to speak with you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.